Thank you, Cynthia. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of us, everyone, and welcome to the Belmas Leadership Preparation and Development Research Interest Group event. We are absolutely delighted to bring you global perspectives on leadership preparation and development, part 3, given the success of part 1 and part 2 in 2024 and 2025 respectively. And we really couldn't wait to organise a third one given that success. But before we begin, we really want to take the opportunity of having you here to remind you of our next meeting that's going to take place in person during our Belmas conference from the 3rd to the 5th of July in Cardiff, Wales. If you're going to be at the conference, please do come along to our meeting on Friday the 3rd of July at 12 p.m. in the Princess Suite. We have a great session planned where we will hear from Dr. Tegwin Ellis on leadership preparation and development in Wales. And we have also invited Dr. Paul Armstrong, Editor-in-Chief of Belmas Journal Management in Education, to talk to us about publishing opportunities as a research interest group. And we look forward to seeing you there. Now, to the important part of tonight. We are absolutely enriched by the presence of 3 very distinguished scholars, Dr. Köksal Banoğlu from Turkey, Dr. Midori Ueda from Japan, and Professor Christopher Bezzina from Malta. Dr. Köksal Banoğlu is a postdoctoral fellow at the Education University of Hong Kong, whose research focuses on technology leadership, inferential social network analysis, and AI-informed student activism, examining how these interconnected areas strengthen school leadership, organizational learning, and student agency. Dr. Midori Ueda is Senior Researcher at the National Institute for Educational Policy Research in Japan. Her area of interest is the relationship between school autonomy and educational governance and the development of school leadership models. And finally, Christopher Bezzina is Professor of Educational Leadership in the Faculty of Education, University of Malta. He's both a Commonwealth Scholar and a Fulbright Fellow. His areas of interest include professional learning communities, professional development of school leaders, and governance. A warm welcome, Köksal, Midori, and Christopher. Thank you for joining us. Just a few practical matters for tonight. For me in Melbourne, it's tonight, but for today, the session will be recorded from the start of the first presentation and conclude at the start of the discussion, so we don't record the discussion. Each presenter will have 20 minutes for their presentation. At the 15-minute mark, we will let each presenter know that they've got just 5 minutes left. And after the 3 presentations, Deb will lead a Q&A and discussion session. As we move along each presentation, you may want to write down some questions yourself or start adding them to the chat, and then we will make sure that we put them to our invited guests. So let's begin, and thank you, Köksal, for being our first presenter.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good day, everyone. I'm sharing my screen. I hope it's coming through okay.
Yeah, it looks perfect.
Okay, perfect. And today I'll discuss Turkish school leadership preparation and practice within its current policy context in Turkey. As you can imagine, I came from Turkey to Hong Kong 2 years ago. So I think I have some fresh knowledge and ideas about the context still. But of course, 2 years is still long to miss something in such a rapidly changing context like Turkey. But I think I can hold the main tension in the context, so I will share my ideas about school leadership preparation and development programs in Turkey. During the next 20 minutes, I will address 3 systematic challenges. The first one is policy instability, and the second, political centralization, and the third one, a newly emerging kind of tug of war, I call, between the Turkish ministry and academia over the leadership preparation in Turkey. On the other hand, I will look on the bright side of the issue, and I'm going to explore some emerging opportunities arising from these very hurdles. Specifically, I'll illustrate how Turkish school leaders resolutely find their way through such challenge in Turkey. This is the twofold structure of today's presentation. The left panel identifies three systematic challenges in Turkish school leadership policy. As I said before, the first one is policy instability. The second, centralization through project school governance. Project school is a new term in Turkish context. And the contested establishment of the national education academia. I think it's very old tradition in France and French education culture, but it's very new to Turkish context, National Education Academy. In response to this, the right panel introduced three leadership opportunities I believe Turkish principles embody. These are the altruist, the brave heart, the sage features. I believe they are thriving in their behaviors because of this challenge. As for policy instability, imagine if you were a school principal in Turkey or someone aspiring to become a principal. Your professional roadmap will change almost every year, annually. I think it's unbelievable because this effectively means a total rewrite of the rules annually. More precisely, the system for appointing Turkish school principals has undergone 23 changes since 1999. I say 23. This is a clear case of chronic policy instability, I believe. Every single update has changed the rules for how principals get hired, rehired, or rotated in Turkey. This creates a huge amount of uncertainty in the profession. Research on how Turkish policies affect organizational behaviors showed that this constant rule changing stops Turkish school leaders from building a strong professional identity. It also ruins the stable environment needed to train effective school leaders in Turkey. Here you can see the shape of this instability over time. Actually, this is just a partial list of amendments. One of the main reasons for this successive revision is that educator unions frequently sue over the regulations, arguing that they violate the constitutional rights of incumbent and aspiring principals. Indeed, they are right, because each regulation has kind of political attempts to design the managerial body of schools in Turkey, to be honest. So what is striking is that no generation of Turkish school leaders has ever experienced a full career under a stable regulatory regime. I say 23 change in regulations. So the rules have always changed before the game was fully played. I think it's unbelievable. To summarize this timeline, I want to make three quick points. The first, revisions clearly cluster around periods of political transitions. The second, the frequency of change has significantly accelerated since 2010. And third, no regulatory framework has remained in force long enough to evaluate its actual effects through assigned school principals. We don't any evidence. We don't have any evidence on their effect on school principals because we don't have time to check it before a new regulation will take the stage. And the second challenge, I think, project schools. That's a new challenge because project schools are the country's absolute best schools, like prestigious science high schools, historical schools in Turkey, and specialized vocational academies. The biggest change under the hood is that the ministry was allowed to handpick and appoint the top teachers and principals directly to those schools, completely skipping the standard nationwide exam or rotation system. This is essentially the ministry's way of advertising the new Turkish-centric education model. That's a political attempt to affect media and all community. We have a new program, namely Turkish-centric education model, and we have project school. But how can we manage these schools? Then, okay, we will handpick some best leaders for these schools and we will assign. Oops, what happened to the rules? So I think it's very critical issue because this is essentially the way of advertising of the government, their political agenda to the community through project school. The question at the heart of this challenge is actually very simple. Who leads whose project? If this project school are run by the so-called best principal, then who would want to enroll their children in a regular school in Turkey? In the project school model, not that the government is allowed to recruit whoever it wants and a principal doesn't simply lead a school. Indeed, leads a government-designated project in Turkey. The school becomes a delivery mechanism. And the principal, they become a project manager, which raises a profound question. Where in this model does educational leadership actually live? I believe this aims to restructure the school governance through the project school framework, which represents a significant intensification of centralization, but very politically driven centralization. I think this is a new way of centralization. Under this model, school principals bear accountability for outcomes determined at the ministerial level, whilst simultaneously being expected to respond to community needs, Turkish community needs and expectations. This dual accountability structure is vertical to the state, horizontal to the community, and this big pressure, indeed, on school principals, even though they are project manager as well. Under this circumstance, the fundamental question this, I think, raises: who leads again whose project? This is not simply a rhetorical question. It's pointed genuine crisis in the conceptualization of school leadership within this kind of politically centralized systems. Whose project? The third challenge, where things get genuinely raw, I think, the recently founded National Education Academy represent perhaps the most structurally significant development in Turkish school leadership preparation. On the surface, the establishment of this new academia, National Education Academy, is a very rational idea. It aims to create a dedicated institution for training teachers and later administrators by the leading authority. I mean, Ministry of National Education. It's very clear. I can see the logic behind. But when we look beneath the surface, then we can easily see a power struggle. This is a deliberate transfer of authority over the Ministry of Education about what teachers and school leaders learn, believe, and are prepared to do, the government will control instead of academia. So I think it's a real hot debate for the coming days in Turkey. This is kind of power shift from academia to governmental ministry body. So I call it power wars because that's precisely what it is. It's a real power war between Turkish ministry and academia. By transferring the locus of professional preparation from universities with their tradition of academic freedom, research-informed practice, and independent quality assurance kind of, I also criticize, but at least we can talk about this kind of control mechanism, scientific control mechanism with universities. But what will happen with governmental national education academies? Who will control the power in this way if the academia and ministry didn't reach any consensus on this new agenda? And now we came to the part that we look on the bright side because every challenge comes with some opportunities, I believe. Because within this turbulence, some school leaders are also doing remarkable things. I always observe these remarkable, exemplary school principals when I was in Turkey. And I want to introduce you the three kinds of principles that I have always encountered in Turkish context during my time back in Turkey. What they represent in their behavior are altruism, courage, and wisdom. These features are not merely anecdotal. They represent highly identifiable patterns in school leadership practice because they have largely been documented in the Turkish school leadership literature as well. Although each profile offers a different response to systemic pressure I mentioned, they are not reactive at all because they don't position, principal do not position themselves in opposition to the system because they are public servant in Turkey. They cannot. But it's a good thing as well. The first profile I want to introduce is what I call the altruist. They are not headline grappling reformers or the brand face of that project schools and new Turkish centric model. They are people who wake up every morning and go to their schools because they genuinely believe that they are there for their children and the community. Pressed from above by the ministerial directives and from below by community expectation, they hold their ground. Their identity as leader is not contingent on regulatory favor. They are indeed characterized by a service orientation that proves remarkably durable under condition of dual accountability. This accountability also serves as a backup point because Turkish school leadership research documents principles who sustained community-centered practice in spite of intensifying top-down regulatory pressures. What distinguishes these individuals is not their explicit resistance to policies indeed, but their internalization of a professional ethic that places the well-being of children and communities at the center of their work. This orientation functions as a form of moral grounding that regulatory turbulence, however intense, has not succeeded in displacing. Drawing on the classic metaphor, I'm sure you know this Alexander cutting the Gordian knot historical character. These leaders identify situations in which conventional compliance-oriented responses are insufficient, and then they take decisive and professionally grounded action. The literature on this distributed cognition and practical wisdom in leadership, just as Aristotle was calling it, terming it phronesis, is instructive here because they are kind of brave hearts. The brave heart is not reckless, but acts from deep professional knowledge, relational attentiveness, and moral clarity. This is the reason why I call my second rising figure in Turkey is Braveheart principles, and I believe they are rather genuine in non-theatrical sense as well. These are principles who, when they encounter a situation that the rule book doesn't cover and where following the rule book would cause harm, act anyway. They make a call. They take a professional risk. Please note that in a system as politically volatile as I mentioned before, as politically volatile as the Turkish one, this kind of courage is not trivial. Even it can cost them their position. But these individuals do it because their professional conscience demands it. I think it's very unique feature of Turkish principles under these pressures.
Köksal, you have 5 minutes left. Sorry to interrupt you. Thank you.
Thank you. The sage is my third figure, traditionally found in Eastern culture. It is seen the Chinese concept of Z and symbolized by the tulip in Turkish culture as well. The tulip represents humility because it naturally bows its head when blooming. Indeed, it's a special combination of humility and competence with clear links to Aristotelian, as I said, phronesis in Western ancient Greek culture. It symbolizes overarching practical wisdom in a distinctly contemporary form. The informal coordination of between school leadership networks at the neighborhood and district level. The sage also means a principal who possesses and freely shares something we might call applied wisdom. It's kind of knowledge that only comes from years and years of engaged reflective practice in a specific place with sometimes specific people. These principles extend their leadership informally across school boundaries. They contribute a kind of distributed community ground leadership ecosystem. These principles, without formal inter-school authority, feel themselves as part of public co-governance that existing policy architecture neither mandates nor adequately recognizes. I believe their contribution represents a significant and under-theorized dimension of Turkish school leadership with important implication for how we conceptualize the boundaries of the principalship role. So what can we do with all of this? The bottom line is stability is not stagnation at all. Actually, it's a precondition for effective leadership development. So Turkish educational policymakers need to seek the broadest consensus with teacher unions for the sake of regulation stability. Secondly, the current trajectory of ministerial control over leadership preparation requires critical examination. So it's crucial to enhance the professional identity and operational autonomy of Turkish school principals on legal basis. Thirdly, Turkish policymaker needs to seek another consensus with academia and give back to universities their proper role in preparing school leaders. Finally, identifies 3 profiles of Turkish principals, altruist, braveheart, and sage, are telling us something important about really context-based leadership preparation and development programs. We should listen to them in person. These 3 profiles suggest a new leadership program orientation that foregrounds moral ambiguity and legal literacy and network professional practice alongside conventional school leadership competencies. The Turkish case can truly enrich Global Leadership Scholarship, I believe. Here are my last comments. I think my time is up as well, including a question as at the end. In every turbulent system, there are kind of resistance who may be pushed to the edge, but still hold the center through their capacity for school and community change. In Turkish school, there are the altruists, the braveheart, and sage. They don't wait for the policy landscape to improve. They lead it anyway. What resilient or resistant profiles drive change in your own country's school system? That's my question for Q&A. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very, very much, Köksal. That was an excellent presentation, and I'm sure it will raise a number of questions. Just remember, you can add them on the chat or you can keep them for later. Our next presenter is Midori Ueda.
Yes.
And Midori, you're welcome to share your presentation.
It's all right to show the
Yes.
my present. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Midori Ueda. I'm very honored to have this wonderful opportunity. I'd like to thank you, Deborah and Barry and Christina, for giving me to these opportunities. So today, I would like to talk about how school leaders are training in Japan. In conclusion first, there is no nationwide uniformity professional standards in Japan, and there are no official preparation program. Local government decide to themselves what kind of school leaders they appointed. After outline of the system today, I would like to discuss the instructional reform have been implemented for the school leaders in Japan and how school management research has changed as a result. In Japan, there has been a division of the opinion over the regarding what is the better for school to remain unchanged even when the principal changed, or where it is better for school to change when the principal changed. Until 1919, the former was dominant, but from the 1990 onwards, the latter was become more prevalent. I hope that today's report will encourage you to consider why such a shift occurs. Many studies of the school management have been conducted in Japan. However, this research has not been published overseas. However, in recent years, some articles by Japanese authors have been published in international journals. Here is some of the representative example. The paper of the left summarized the research finding of the Japanese member of the participating in the International Successful School Leadership Principalship Project. The paper is the middle in the review of the school management paper published in Japan from 1978 to the 2018. Using the keywords school leaders, leadership and management in school organization, and school governance, and was published in the Bulletin of the University of Tsukuba. Many of the published papers in school management in Japan introduced it. The reference will be shown where that can be obtained them, so please refer to them. However, all the papers are written in Japanese, so please use the AI translated function. Now, I would like to introduce to the legal framework school principle. The characteristic of Japanese principle and instructional change that have led to these characteristics are along with the relevant research. Before that, I would like you to understand some basic aspects of the Japanese teacher system. Please note that system. I will discuss today primary school at the compulsory education level, particularly elementary school. Junior high school generally follows the elementary school system. In Japan, elementary school and junior high school are established by Municipal Board of Education, which are basic local government. High school are established by the Prefectural Board of Education, so I will omit the aspect today. The function of the Japanese teacher system is a prefectural government teacher system. Instead of the Municipal Board of Education, which are school operators, the Prefectural Board of Education bears the full cost of teachers' salaries and therefore holds the personnel authorities to manage of their service. I would like to explain what the principal is. The role of school principal is defined in the School Education Act in Japan. The principal role is to oversee school affairs and manage the staff. The meaning of each term is written on the slide. So this please read these four terms. Okay. So next, I will explain three important laws concerning school principal. In the initial post-war period, school principal was subject to the licensing system. The legal base of this was the Teacher Licensing Act, enacted in 1949. This was revised in the 1954. And the licensing position of the principal was removed. As a result, principal was appointed by Prefectural Board of Education. That leads to structures controlled by school by Board of Education. In particular, the centralization of the power due to the law concerning the organization and operation of the local education administration further strengthened control over schools. The next important law is the School Education Act Enforcement Regulation. This law stipulated the qualifications of the school principal. The three qualifications of the school principal as written on the slide. So one is a must process of the specialized of the first class teacher's license in the whole education and the position of 5 years more. And the second one must of the health education related position of the 10 years. So third one is new contents. So must be appointed to the person is decided to the by local authorities. So that is a new aspect of the Health District Act. So the 2000 revised added to the third item, allowing the individuals outside of the teaching license to become a school principal at the discretion of the Board of Education. The result is a appointment of the individual from the private sector, among others as a principal. They were expected to demonstrated management skills and leadership to effectively to systematically management schools. This stemmed from the need for the principal to process management skills and leadership ability to effectively improve of the direction of the representative school autonomy and independence, as recommended in the 1998 Central Council for Education report. But many principals, while experienced as a teacher, so lacked the experience as a management of the training, making them unable to effectively unitarize their assistant authorities of resource for the improved schools. Therefore, effect the mode of bring the new talent as a principal. The third law is the Specialized Act on the Educational Public Employee. The 2018 revision made mandate to the development of the training indicators for the teachers and school leaders by Prefecture Board of Education. Today, due to the time constructing, I can't go in detail about these training indicators today. I will present these development indicators and training and recruitment and professional development strategies based on them at Belma's annual conference in July. So please come to listen if you are interested. And so next, I would like to summarize of the characteristic of Japanese qualification system and training system for the principal. This dialogue is a frame created by Shinohara to understanding to the qualification appointment system and training system for school leaders. Shinohara categorized school leaders' qualification in two main types. One is application condition and second one is ability qualification. From this framework, it was based on the Japanese only has the application condition as a basic requirement for appointment. Furthermore, while this application condition requires, in principle, the accreditation for the teaching license or certain amount of teacher experience, in reality, it is left to the discretionary judgment for the Prefecture's Board of Education, which is appointed authorities. In that sense, the application condition has based qualification for school leaders in Japan is following out. From this point, Shinohara argues that Japan's lack of the qualification for appointment of school leaders and professional qualification to provide their abilities. Following Shinohara's framework, I explained the Japanese qualification system and the training system. Specifically, one key characteristic is a lack of nationwide and uniformity professional standards. In 2009, JC, Japanese Association for School Education Administration, is we call JC, proposed the professional standards for the school principal. A working group was established with the JC to collect and analyze information from other countries and conduct interviews with the relevant parties such as the School Principal Association before formulating the standards. It was revised to 2012. However, this remains to the research achievement within the academic society and was never used as professional standards. For those interested in the standardized process, I have included a URL for your reference. So it is English. So please do not only to read our standards. The second characteristic in the abolished to the licenses system and the adoption of the appointment system. Furthermore, appointments are made the discretion of the prefecture committee and decisions in the cities, which hold personal authorities. Therefore, the contents of the method by variety. So, next slide summarizes these characteristics of the examination for the principal. This is a classification of the method adopted by each local government. Ojima conducted to the nationwide survey is 2001, analysis of the contents of the appointment examination in each local government. This time, I used the framework of the classifieds of the comparative implementation of the statistics of the 2025. This table summarizes the result. Its characteristics can be summarized in the 4 points indicated on the slide. So in Japan, there is no system in place for the management of the quality of the such as device as contents. Furthermore, as formal training before hiring is almost non-existent in Japan. Principals take the initiative to provide this training. Educational publishers publish study guides for the principal examination. In some regions, senior principals have been shared to informal study groups to mentor and support their juniors. This realized on informal and individual effort in the characteristics of Japan. Therefore, the establishment of the Graduate School of Education in Japan in 20,000 served as a catalyst for the promoting research into how to training school leaders at the graduate level. So finally, I would like to summarize the trend in reform concerning the Japanese teacher system to date to the type of the research that based on the conducted with the context. As a method earlier, I mentioned earlier, from the post-war period until the 1954 revision of the Teacher Licenses Act, the system was heavily influenced by the United States due to the influence of the American occupation. The license system was intended to create the mechanism for the training principal with the educational experience. However, the 1954 revision of the law headed in the direction of the shifted toward the opposite directions. Strengthened the manager as supervising function. In terms of the research, studies focus on the United States remains the central to school management and administration. The situation is changed dramatically with the 1998 report from the Central Council for Education. This report outlines the direction that emphasizes the autonomy and independence of the schools. However, this autonomy and independence is not the same as a powerful autonomy and independence seems like as in England. Their schools are given complete authorities over the school management. Autonomy and independence in the Japanese school as expressed through measures such as allocation of the small amount of the budget, the experience of the distinguished educational activities in the curriculum, and increasing the increasing the participation of the local residents and the parents in schools through the school council system and the school management committee system. Nevertheless, this represented a major shift in the direction of the Japanese schools, demanding the greater management skills and leadership from principals. Consequently, research into the training and development of the school leaders, US, the UK, and other countries becoming widespread. And research meant to the undertaking the current situation in Japan and principally addressing the changes also become more prevalent. For example, Ojima assessing the situation in Japan presented the necessary for the training for leaders at the graduate level and the importance of school improvement through the formulation and verification of the school management plan and school evaluation, emphasized the importance of the management over school leadership. On the other hand, Hamada pointed out of the importance of the school leadership is presented by need to support principal and build social network that enabling principal to experience leadership. There are many other research findings listed in this table. Many of these summarized in the summarized in the review paper by Sato and Yata, which was introduced as a beginning. So this is table mainly listed those published as a book. Since all of these are written in Japanese, so you will be maybe difficult to overseas people to obtain and read. But I hope you will be some help to your understanding. So finally, I have summarized of the characteristic of the school leaders training in Japan. That is a have discussion into 7 points. One, the characteristic of a school principal has school leaders as shifted from educational principal to administrative supervisory principal and manager's principal. Two, following the degradation of the decentralization reform under the NPM reform since on the 1990s, which expanded the autonomy and independence of school, researches Japanese school management using keywords such as management and leadership flourished. Three, research on the qualification of the ability of the principals who are responsible for the autonomy and independence of school, as well as theoretical research and program development cultivated those quantitative and abilities of the promoted. Fourth, parsing the training leaders at the graduate level, established the graduate school of education in Japan become a turning point. Because individual university develops their own program, the development of the nationwide programs, nationwide professional standards and centralized system has not emerged. Fifth, there is no formal system of the development of the qualification and abilities of principal before they are appointed. It is left to the individual effort and motivation, and there is no system for quality control. Six, the principal recruitment process is also left to each local government and resulting in the lack of uniformity and difference in context and quality. So last 7, a principal are required to reform teachers' workload and management diversity faculty of the staff organization. Therefore, the development of the professional skills related to the management and leadership for the principal and construction of the social network system to support of the school principal. It is urgent issues in Japan. So thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Midori. Really fascinating presentation and you shared some very interesting figures with us as well. So thank you for that. And finally, Christopher, please welcome again.
Thank you.
And when you're ready, you can share your presentation.
Sure, thank you. Right. Right. Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank my esteemed colleagues from Belmas for kindly inviting me to share some thoughts about leadership, preparation, and development in my country. One thing we have to be clear that Malta, unlike Japan and Turkey, is a small island state. So I think as a point of departure, one needs to appreciate the context we're coming from. We have a population of just over 500,000, with roughly 160 schools, hence 160 principals or school leaders, whichever nomenclature you would like to use. In this brief presentation, and I'll keep it very brief, just looking at basically the historical developments that have taken place in Malta since we started looking at the concepts of administration, management, and leadership, which is a fairly new concept that came into being. But I'll try and keep it that and look at possibly some challenges that we may be facing. As a background, apart from being a small island state, we're also highly centralized. we follow the dictates of government. But it's interesting, as Köksal was saying about Turkey, institutions have quite a lot of free hand in developing their programs, and they still do to a large extent. Let's hope it remains so, but we'll see. But let me get started. I mean, the case of Malta, I think looking back from a historical perspective, it all started in the 50s and early 60s when promising Maltese teachers were sent to England. It's interesting that when I came back from abroad doing my master's, I came into a context where back in the mid 80s, when I came back to Malta, I found that school leaders practically got into a position of leadership or headship, mainly through a system of seniority. And I'll briefly explain that. But prior to that, in the 50s and 60s, a lot of Maltese promising teachers were sent to England, mainly two colleges, St. Mary's Training College in Strawberry Hill, Middlesex, or St. Charles Training College. So those who showed promise and wanted to eventually take on deputy headship were sent abroad for a year, came back and started taking on leadership positions. After that, there was a lull. Historically, I couldn't find anything to show what happened, but that sort of relationship with England stopped for a while. So most of the things what was happening till basically the 1990s, that people were promoted from teachers to assistant heads, as they were called then, and then heads of school, basically on the question of seniority. That is, you're having years of service within the public sector. So people were expected to do a number of years, usually, I think it's at the moment around 10 years of teaching experience to become eligible for headship. Then you needed to undergo a competitive interview. So people were interviewed for posts, and these are posts that are within the state sector. We have three sectors in Malta: the state, the church, and the independent. Church and the independent operate differently. They have their own criteria. However, you need to have still a qualification which is recognized by the state, and I'll explain that. Up to the 50s and 60s, people only needed a certificate from these training colleges. After that, we started introducing diploma programs. And I think this is interesting that we saw an evolution from the mid 80s. When I came back from abroad, I found that we had established a diploma in education administration and management, many thanks to some British colleagues of ours who helped us get it started. This was in October 1985. These were evening programs. The first programs that we started were of 2 years. It also included a 1 week study visit abroad, and that's how it all started. Most of the people who engaged in that first diploma, which commenced, as I said, in 85, were already established educators. After that, the Maltese government, together with our university, mainly the Faculty of Education, institutionalized the diploma program for all heads of school. So by the early 90s, all heads on the Maltese Islands had undergone a diploma or eventually the postgraduate diploma. This trend that the government introduced encouraged the faculty to start running two programs, an evening program and the daily program. This daily program allowed existing current, that is, heads of school to attend our morning programs twice a week. And this helped all school leaders on the island to become, to be in possession of that diploma. By 1995, the major trade union we have, which is a teachers' trade union, the Malta Union of Teachers, as it's called, agreed with the government through a collective agreement that anyone who wanted to become a school leader had to have at least a postgraduate diploma. So practically all our school leaders now are either in possession of that diploma, if they're still around, or else, as we see along the way, the master's program that the university and other institutions offer. So I think as a small island state and a Commonwealth country, I think Malta was one of the first to institutionalize postgraduate qualifications for those wishing to enter administrative or leadership positions. By October of 2011, we introduced a postgraduate diploma in education, leadership, and management. Again, the title started to shift away from administration and management to then leadership, being introduced in 2011. In 1999, I set up the first master's in education leadership, and that course is still running till this very day. These are 3-year part-time programs. They're made up of a variety of programs, which I'll explain. And the latest initiative, very latest, is we commenced in September 2024 a professional doctorate in educational leadership, which is NED as it's known. So basically, these are the type of programs we have. The last two programs, the master's and the professional doctorates, are the ones that the university, through the faculty, is currently running. The main characteristics of the programs are that the diploma and postgraduate diploma were, as I said, 2-year part-time, and they used to attend 2-3 hour sessions per week, hence a commitment of 6 hours per week. These were still face-to-face sessions. This was pre-COVID days, and sessions took place at the university campus. It also involved writing a long essay and a study visit abroad. As I said, the requirements were drawn up during a collective agreement between the government and the Union of Teachers, with prospective heads needing at least 5 years of experience as an assistant head or a deputy head, in addition to having this postgraduate qualification. Eventually, this was offered to all heads of schools on the island. The master's degree, on the other hand, is a 3-year part-time evening program. 2 years is a taught component, followed by a dissertation that takes place over a 1-year program. And the program from face-to-face has evolved into now a blended approach to one's study. So practically, we're now, as a university, as a faculty, around 50-50 balanced as such. So it allows people, given the constraints of today's work, people tend to be approaching more and respecting more a blended approach to their studies. Okay. At the same time, I'm presenting the university case, but for my Maltese colleagues who may be attending, I know there's 1 or 2 who may be attending, but also for my international colleagues, it is worth mentioning that Malta has, over the years, grown exponentially in the type of further and higher education institutions that provide courses. For example, we have institutions that that are fully licensed by the Maltese Further and Higher Education Authority, because all institutions have to be approved by a national authority. They can either have their own homegrown courses or else link up with foreign institutions. Mainly these are British institutions that run their courses on the island, usually either through mostly through a blended approach. So there are other institutions that would be offering a myriad of courses, whether in the field of education or otherwise. So there is a lot of competition around, whereas in the past the university had a monopoly. Now we have to really take on the challenge that other institutions offer. to ensure that the quality of our programs are what they are. Furthermore, there are also various scholarship schemes that exist and provide and encourage Maltese educators to further their studies, whether they want to pursue them locally or further their studies abroad. Often, Maltese students tend to approach scholarships for their doctoral studies and go usually either to the UK. This was more accessible prior to Brexit, which is a sore spot for a lot of people, but also now to other European countries. So there is this possibility as well that you use scholarship funds both to fund your own studies locally or to further your studies abroad. And I think that's a very interesting thing for Maltese students. And finally, as I said, the latest development is the introduction of a professional doctorate. That's my main focus of attention at the moment. The characteristics of this program is basically it's meant for mid-career educators who wish to leave an impact on their institution. A lot of people who get their doctorate would like to engage in furthering their career at university. Given the smallness of our country, this is often not possible, even though we utilize quite a lot of practitioners in our programs, whether it's the master's and also the doctorate. This is meant for people who want to leave an impact where they currently work or in other institutions. It's a 5-year part-time program. It has a 2-year component. In fact, this course finishes in the next couple of months. We'll finish the first 2 years. Then they'll go into dissertation mode. This would entail at least a 3-year research work on the dissertation, which is also of project orientation as well, if they so wish. The course is blended, but involves also quite intensive weeks, 3 intensive weeks over the year, weekend sessions, and sometimes sessions during the week. It's quite intensive. It also incorporates a portfolio. We're developing a portfolio along the first 4 years of the program. We're now in the stage where we're being encouraged to open up a new course of studies. We're reviewing and will be reviewing again with our students as well, the current cohort, in order to be able to open up, because we would like to open up this program to at least other people who are expressing an interest. We're having people expressing an interest from different parts of Europe. We're even getting expressions of interest from the United States to follow this program. So I think if we brand our program, it could be very attractive to people coming from abroad. What are the challenges? I mean, there are quite a number of challenges that we face. I think given that we are a small island state, a lot of institutions tend to work in silos. I feel we need to address this for the sake of our own country and its own development. We can't just work on our own. So I do feel we need to understand the landscape that we're working in, that is getting a clear idea of what's out there, what's being offered. I think better coordination between institutions is called for. I know it's difficult. People find it hard in small island states. I think the literature speaks for itself. We're too insular. But I think there are, it would be interesting, in my opinion, reading the literature, hearing the presentations, that whilst we might not have national programs for school principals, like, for example, Sweden has, the one I'm familiar with, there are opportunities where we could, together with other Maltese institutions and possibly even foreign institutions, is to design programs, joint programs that work around micro-credentials. I think this could be an interesting venture that the Maltese education and further and higher education institutions could consider. And therefore, cut across boundaries that we currently live in. Okay, I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher. I certainly learned so
Thanks.
much from your presentation. Thank you. I appreciate it. As we said, we will begin our Q&A and discussion. And at this point, we will stop recording.